Welcome to another Sales Wisdom Pod. We have Dale Dupree with us. He is founder and CSO at the Sales Rebellion. We're going to talk about sales, obviously, today. We're going to talk about podcasting, going to talk about AI, communities, everything in between. Really glad to have Dale on. This podcast is brought to you by my podcasting company. It's called podpire.com. Podcasts are amazing. If you want to learn, if you want to grow a community, subscribers, get some leads, get some clients on the back end as well, I can help you do that. If you want to start scale, be invited to pod, or even if you want sponsors, I can help you with that. I've got some pretty innovative pricing plans and everything. So hit me up, podpire.com. Dale, welcome to the pod. Can you tell me a bit more about yourself and the Sales Rebellion?
Sure. I'll start at the beginning. Basically, my dad broke away from the big box stores back in 1984 and started his own company. And I was born a year later. People like to say that toner was running in my veins. My father started a copier business. Copy machines are boring. They're not sexy. They kind of suck. It's not really like a thing that you grow up wanting to do. I was the opposite of that. I fell in love with the copy machine because of my father and because of his business, his entrepreneurialism, and just in general the environment that he had created. So from there, I lived my life. I grew up. I became an adult, but I actually strayed away from the family business and from joining him. And I actually toured in a band. I was on Warner Brothers Records from the time I was 17 until I was about 21, 22. I did it full time. It became more of a hobby at a certain point, and I decided to build a more sustainable lifestyle for myself. And sales seemed like the only thing that I could do because I had no college degree, and the only thing I knew was music. So I kind of like told myself a lie in some instances there, but I'm really glad that I did, quite frankly, because sales has changed my life. I spent the first couple of years sucking at copier sales, and then I spent the next 11 years crushing it, becoming a VP of sales, breaking every record in the book. I worked for my dad for a little stint in there, about 4 years. And my dad sold his business, and the group that acquired us, yeah, it took me to the next level and just like unleashing me essentially into like my potential and giving me a little bit more like flexibility and just in general like a different lifestyle inside of the copier space. So in the process of that, I became kind of like community celebritized, if you will, and at the same time was getting and drawing attention from some like very big organizations and ultimately like manufacturers of copy machines. We're global companies, publicly traded. So I shared the spotlight for a hot minute and started to like think to myself that maybe it's not just about the fact that I've sold a bunch of copiers, but that it's about the fact that I'm good at sales. And I started to deeply think about like my activities, my philosophy, the way that I looked at sales in the first place. And eventually I said goodbye to the corporate world, left a company called Xerox. I worked for a local organization that they had in Florida called Zeno. And I decided to start the Sales Rebellion and teach people basically, the idea of getting back to more of the human nature of sales, creating experiences for people, causing a sense of wonder, providing a much different perspective to the buyer, and to stop being like seller centric. I don't even know where that comes from, that word, that philosophy, that concept. It mostly from gurus that have never sold and just want to make money. And then so instead, I wanted to put power back into people's hands and not corporations, and ultimately shift the mindset and allow people to find ultimate freedom inside of what it is that they do. I've been doing this for about 4 years now. It's been fantastic. I have a whole company behind me. My business partner, Jeff Villegas, and I have built this bad boy into what it is today. We look to do it all the way to the end of time if we can and pass it along to generations to come.
And you've been a singer on a band as well in between. How did you mix both careers, and how did one added value to the other, except of having a nice soft voice that would appeal to the audiences?
I played in a metal band, so although I do have a singing voice and like a talent for singing, I was like the screamer in the band. So when people find my music, they usually laugh and they're like, "That's you, bro!" Like, yeah, that's actually me. I would say like being in a band is the best sales training that you could ever have. I showed up in the I was 17 years old on my first tour, like with my band, like just turning 18 kind of thing. And I like that's my experience of life was the community, the backyard. I was homeschooled. Like I knew people for sure and I'd experienced things, but dude, what I experienced in the first 50 days of touring was nuts. And like the thought of going to like random cities where nobody knew your name and having to like introduce yourself to kids and like build a reputation within like 10 minutes of your set starting, because if you didn't, people would just walk out and leave if they didn't know who you were. So we had to gain like credibility and trust from the stage. We had to put on like a performance that was enjoyable to other people and not like just ourselves. So it helped me to understand like perception, preference, risk, and those things were very valuable. And then on top of it, I would, like fill my backpack up with CDs and walk around the show and like, hey, what's up? I'm Dale. I'm one of the guys playing tonight. I'm one of the bands. You've probably never heard of us. We've got some CDs for sale. I wanted to see if y'all would be interested in like listening real quick. And I had like a Walkman back in the day, and I would have like, the CD player version of them, right? And back when that was a thing, and I used to, pop the CD in, let people listen, and then like sell these literal EPs that we released nationwide and actually globally through the major record label that we ended up on. But I was selling them for $5 at the time in little red slips and they were burned, if anybody knows that term. So we basically like replicated our album onto a bunch of our own CDs and just sold them for $5. And that's like my literal like hustle story. Like a lot of people talk about high school and selling comic books or whatever. Like my hustle story was building my dream at a very young age. And so music really did affect the way that I thought about sales and ultimately helped me to understand that sales is an art. And that sure, there's some science involved, but ultimately it comes down to the artist and it comes down to the person that's actually like putting those, vials together of these different elements in the first place. It is all about the art for me.
You have such an incredible and interesting story. I want to hear you though, because you've been at the bottom of the barrel a couple of times and you've gone up, it seems nowadays, with the family, the habits, the money, everything in between. So how did you get from bottom of the barrel, depression, suicidal thoughts to where you are today?
Going like all the way down to the bottom is it kind of, from my own perspective, happen to anybody. I think salespeople are pretty susceptible to it though, because of just the pressures of performance, the constant state of rejection. There's a lot of variables. There's drama in the office. There, like everybody hates the salesperson. Like that's a common thought. I just wrote a kid's book called The Sales Whale, and a friend of mine, Clint, he made a post about it this morning that like kind of shocked me. I was like, that was so kind and nice of him. But at the same time, the story was really the best part, which is that he asked his daughter after he was reading my book to her, he said, do you know what a cold call is? Because we mentioned it in the book. And she said, yeah, it's spam. And I thought to myself, like, dude, see, that's why I wrote a kid's book about sales, right? Because we have literally created a stereotype of negativity that all of us live in that call ourselves salespeople. And it's because of the sins of the father, as I like to say, like the people of the past that have come through and basically just barreled their way forward, made as much money as they possibly could, focused on success as this thing of power and control that they don't want to give up to anybody else. Like to me, there's no servant leadership inside of that mindset, and so it's a failing mindset from my perspective because of that. So getting to the bottom was easy if you really think about it. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but it was easy because I struggled with depression and have most of my life, especially at a young age. But I like getting into a vertical where it like battles you daily, even if you don't have it. It wasn't necessarily the best move that I ever made, but the journey was intense, and that like self-worth and discipline and this identity that I had created for myself through sales was something that saved me from my own depression just as much as it caused it to flare up as much as it did in the first place. So it was almost as if like I was in a place where like I could ultimately beat it altogether, but I could also be like taken away because of it. And the first time as an adult that I was suicidal and that I actually tried to commit suicide, I was a very high performing salesperson at that point. I had a lot of success. I had a ton of money. I had a ton of favor. I had a ton of connections. I had great circles that like most people would look at my life and be like, man, you're coming up, man. This is exciting. And meanwhile, I was at home in a deep state of darkness and depression and lying about the lifestyles that I was living outside of work and outside of, what my friends saw or my wife experienced or my family knew. And I got to that place where the only choice at that point that I thought in my head was to kill myself. And I tried to go through with it, and divinity saved my life. And in the
Uh,
process of that, bro, I like the real outcome was is that a lot of people have a perspective on the way that they live their life that's molded by experiences. Nothing in this world has ever been harder for me than that moment. And so when I got back to my feet and things started to get better, it was easy for me to exist in sales again, even though it's still hard. Like sales is hard, y'all. Like it's always going to be hard. I don't care if you think it's easy. Like if I sat with you for a whole day, I guarantee you, I'd be like, you seem aggravated. You seem frustrated. This seems hard. But because of what I know, like life can end up where I know life can end up because of the wrong focus and the struggles that we go through. I look at things much differently now, and there's no greater place in my mind to be than sales because of it, because I truly believe that sales saved my life.
right. And when you mentioned divinity, I mean, you were so close, so close. So in these moments, it's like flipping a coin, right? And yeah, call it luck, call it God or something, but yeah, something else that wasn't you saved you. Your environment, something outside of your internal locus of control. I love sharing the bottom of the barrel with this audience. So, what did that look for you? Was it like drugs? Was it seeing other women? Like, what was that life of vice?
Yeah, it was anger. I had an anger problem. Like, so as a young man, like I can expose this part. I have no problem. I'm an open book. Anybody wants to ask me anything outside of this podcast, even reach out, feel free. But when I was young, I was kind of like a defender to the nerds, if you will. Like I'm a total geek myself, and like I loved the nerds. Those were my people. I also liked those that were less fortunate. I was attracted to them because I believed that I was kind of a weirdo, and but I had a lot of talent and success at a young age. I was very athletic, as an example. So the kid on the team that like never got it to play, but like he had to, right? So the coach would put him in for 2 minutes and take him off. Like I passed the ball to that kid more than anybody else because I believed in the spirit of community and just people in general. And so because of that, like the early trauma in my life as well too, with things like fighting and having to defend people, I kind of became addicted to it, if you will. And like that was one of my big vices, that when I was sad, I would cover it up with anger, and I would literally go fight people, like for lack of a better way to describe it. I also played music in a very violent industry, if you will. Like my art, like you go to a Taylor Swift concert, you might fight a drunk dad because they were inebriated. You go to a metal show and you're going to get beat up just because some guy is angry and he hates everybody in the room. So there was a lot of gang violence. There was a lot of things that I was witness to and suffered from. I've had friends suffer from it too, all the way to actual suicide and or ending up dead because of the situations and the places they put themselves into. And those were the people I hung out with. So drugs, like, yeah, there was like, I dabbled with it a little bit. Alcohol for sure. Like alcohol was definitely a vice in the process. But like, dude, it was my depression. What's interesting about, I think, my story, because I've heard so many and I've connected with so many people as well too that have gone through it. Like it was a very dark place that where it was almost as if I was having like psychotic episodes, and that like I could hallucinate like an entire thing happening, like literally because of just like how dark things had gotten for me and where I wanted to end up. I didn't really need a lot of influence from the outside world. And for sure there is the opportunity, especially in music, for promiscuity and like cheating on your wife or your girl, and it being covered up. It's like actually it's like acceptable in industries like that. And so it was easy for me to like talk to other women and say like, oh no, you're just talking to them, like that's cool. So I looked at pretty much every single thing that I was doing when I was done and realized that like I had just literally let go, given up, and could care less about anything, including myself. And I just wanted to die. And I would do anything to die at that point in my life, which is a crazy thing to say. And sometimes it hurts to think about. But at the same time, it's important that people hear that because there's somebody out there that feels the same way right now. And honestly, I felt like there was zero hope at those in those moments. I knew I was going to kill myself and I was planning it. It was in the like literally in the process and in the works. And again, like I said, divinity played a role, and things changed that day, and my whole life has changed ever since. But really, like when you think of the vices, the anger, the fighting, the just general like deceit that you commit with yourself, saying things like, "Oh, I'm just doing like a little bit of something. I'm not going all the way in on it." So like that doesn't make it so bad. Those things definitely feed deeper into that self-doubt instead of worth. Which it's interesting, right? Because we seek vices to feel better and feel more, proud of who we are, and to prop us up. But all they do is bring us down. They're a complete and total lie. But it took me getting to the end to really figure that out.
Wow, dude, shivers. Couple of points here. Well, first, I can relate a lot to you because I'm a fighter myself. I never had anger issues, but my best friend that's coming to my wedding in a week from now, he had anger issues, So I would fuck with people and he would just like smack them at pretty much on a weekly basis because we would, in Quebec, we have this drunken culture, and I pretty much blacked out at least once a weekend for 3 years of my life from 15 to 18, if not 19 and 20. So can really much relate to that. I was a metal listener at some point. I think metal, what it does, it's kind of the, boo boo punching bag experiment. Like, does it alleviate the anger or does it generate pathways in your brain to make it seem okay to always rage out, what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel it's good to let it out, quote unquote, or do you need to keep it in and have some kind of self-cleaning algorithm, whatever that is, meditation or talking to someone and so forth?
Yeah, so I would also say that metal, like, and the music scene in general was also like a catalyst of like helping me to heal and become better as well too. And so I'm not shy about my faith. I'm a believer. I'm a Christian, and I actually looked at metal and music. To me, like I toured with bands and shared the stage with people that you would listen to their music and be like, that's Christian music, is what you'd say. But the weight that they carried and things like their lyrics, as an example, were freeing. And like the thing about it is that I always like that is that like I'm just an extreme person. So like here I am like running a rebellion against the status quo of sales. Like that's just my MO for the most part. I feed off that. And so like metal was attractive to me and like helpful for me because it actually helped to heal me. It helped me to understand that like I should be loud and proud about my religion, about the things that I believe, about my morals, my ethics, the person that I am, and like watching some of my friends on stage, like literally, like if if you're listening, you can understand this like worship while they play this music that like your mom and dad when you were 16 would be like, why are you listening to that? Like to me it was, wow, these guys get it. They have like a different perspective. They're carrying out their calling so much differently, and they're speaking to people on such a raw level that it gets to them. And so like, yeah, so kids show up to those shows to like beat each other up and mosh and throw their bodies around. But slowly over time, the more that you like immerse yourself into the culture of positivity inside of the hardcore and metal scenes, you recognize that like there's something more to it. And that ultimately, like you either figure out, like I was always a rowdy kid, but at a certain point I like stopped hurting people at the shows where I was being rowdy and just like immersed myself into like the movement of the music, the passion of the people, the belief of those that were standing in front of us and leading us in those moments through things that could strengthen our faith. And because of that, like I changed my whole perspective on the way things like metal are looked at in this day and age, especially by people. So that's kind of a loaded answer, but that's what my thoughts.
It's a good one. It's a good one for sure. And again, I can relate on the extreme part. And for a moment, I thought like, what if I was a normal listener listening to Dell. I mean, my audience, they're CEOs, but I was like, I'd be scared to hear like two high performers talk with one another. These folks are scary, you know, they're extreme and they do everything like super fucking hardcore. That I just wanted to share that thought. I don't have any follow up question for that one. My next question is on the parenting level. Um, what are your tips? You have 2 kids right now, and it seems that you spend a good amount of your time thinking, acting, and writing about that. So any tips for me that's about to have children in less than 2 years?
Don't take anybody's advice. That's what I always say. Like the best advice I ever heard was people telling me like just stay present and then also like stay out of the way of your child. Like let your child live, let them experience, let them enjoy. Like do not be the path of least resistance. And that's what my father was for me. So like the way I see my role as a father is that I provide ultimate freedom to my children and to my wife. And the thought is that sales provides that ultimate freedom for us and that we get to control our intake and our output because we're not shackled to things like most folks are from a 9 to 5 perspective. And so I know I run my own business now, but if I worked for somebody else, I would have the same perspective that I would be basking in ultimate freedom on a daily basis, putting the work in necessary in order to meet the metrics and hit the needs of some old school boss that doesn't understand because I get it. And achieving those things for myself is all that matters. I don't give a shit about what somebody else says I'm supposed to achieve. I care only about like what serves my community and what blesses my life. And the thought process of that allows me to be driven much differently because instead of saying like, oh, I got to get work done before I can hang out with my kid, I say, what could I do to hang out with my kid like more often? And how could I immerse myself into work differently in a way that like makes me less of a dad that works and more of a father that involves his son and his passion. So like my little dude, my 5-year-old, like he'll come chill with me, you know, at the coffee shops like this and hang out and we'll play in between calls and he loves it. I mean, he's part of my life ultimately. And you know, and that's how I see it is that there is no work-life balance. Like you should just be living all the time and sales is that provider of ultimate freedom for us and it's why I recommend people to do it. I know that sales isn't for everybody at the same time too, but as much as I say that, I also like almost immediately go to the thought of like, yeah, but who cares what people say or who cares what the standard is that like sales isn't for everybody? Like why not try it anyway? Why not see if you can immerse yourself into it? And because ultimately, like it is about just becoming better as people on this earth. It's about becoming better. The more we can be better people, the byproduct is more success in business, more money because of it, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Like we could go on. But if we sit back and we really think about like the fact that I heard this the other day, it was like, if you're lucky, you'll live 75 years. And I thought to myself, that's crazy. Well, first off, like at least it's not 40 years anymore like it used to be. But if you're lucky, you'll live 75 years, right? And I thought about that for a second. I was like, 75 years. So if I think about like my sons and my time with them, that means I can spend at this point in my life about 50 summers with them. 50 summers, bro. Think about that. Like, that's not a lot. And then like you get to summer and it's like too hot, you don't want to do anything. It's like you just skipped one. Well, now you got 49. You know, like if we really could see and grasp the value of time and how much or how important our lives are and how much time means to each moment, I think all of us would change our tune about everything that we do. So, you know, that's my tip on being a better dad is like understand that ultimately it is all about just like doing your thing and being a rebel, getting out of the way of your child and ultimately understanding how important and precious time is. You know, they say time is a thief. I just want to put this out there. They say time is a thief. And I've hated that saying since I was younger, especially now that my father has passed and I don't have him anymore. And I think, and I start to hate time because of it. But I have embraced time over the last 5 years. And I remember every single moment of every freaking day with my son, bro. All of it, because I made the decision to leave my work, live directly in front of him, do everything that I could to run my own business and have that ultimate freedom to be around him And because of it, even though it sucks, like how his hands are so much bigger when I hold them and how his body is like, 30 pounds instead of 10, it's also the most beautiful thing in the world because I've been present for every single moment. And so I do not think about like, oh, I wish you were a kid again. I'm like, this is so awesome to like be a part of this and remember every moment. So those are my big thoughts for you, dude.
Wow, man. Banger as an ender. So thank you for that. Where can people find out more about you, Dale?
The best place to find out about me is just salesrebellion.com. You can find all kinds of resources about the organization, our social channels, everything else. But if you want to follow content, linkedin.com/in/copier warrior, my old moniker. You can find me there daily. I'm always posting content, having a good time. Come join the rebellion.
My man. And this was another CEO Wisdom Podcast.com.